one of the big public health concerns with trade and investment treaties has been for some time the real and potential spread of unhealthy commodities. And this ranges from tobacco to obesogenic foods to alcohol and even to hazardous waste. So briefly speaking, tobacco has long been a very profitable trading commodity. And if you look at studies on more recent late 20th century tobacco trade, with transnational firms eager for new addicts as smokers in high-income countries increasingly budded out, we find that as availability of this product increases and price competition occurs, consumption rises, and that's pretty consistent with classical economic trade theory. But it also becomes more difficult for many countries to enact tobacco control measures. Trade and investment treaties are not necessarily the sole or the only cause for these trade-related consumption increases, since liberalization could be undertaken voluntarily. It could be undertaken as part of mandatory structural adjustment or austerity measures, or under pressure from richer trading countries. But trade and investment treaties do create a more enabling environment for such trade. The efforts of tobacco transnationals to challenge tobacco control measures are well known. We still have the ongoing WTO dispute on plain packaging that has not yet been resolved. Philip Morris's unsuccessful investment challenge to Uruguay's health warnings on cigarette packs, and its similarly unsuccessful challenge to Australia's plain packaging. This is no excuse for complacency, as the discussion around Pacer Plus reveals, but there does seem to be a global norm cascade against big tobacco. Yet there are still good old political economy forces that bind many countries to the interests of tobacco transnationals. And an unabashed advertisement for a Thursday seminar luncheon I'm going to be doing with my colleague Rafael Encucha on a study that really looked at the relationship between trade, tobacco, and tobacco farming in 3 sub-Saharan African countries. And if anybody's interested in seeing us to demolish the livelihood argument that's often made by tobacco transnationals about tobacco farmers in poor countries, please do come. We do demolish it. Now, with food and nutrition, the health impacts of trade and investment liberalization really depend on whether it increases the availability and affordability of healthy foods or of unhealthy and obesogenic foods. Unfortunately, much of the evidence points to the latter. If for no other reason than unhealthy foods have longer shelf lives and it makes international transport much easier, that they are addictive and inexpensive, which incentivizes foreign investment in local manufacturing, and especially in low-income countries where such foods are fairly recent novelties and endemic poverty makes cheap, unhealthy foods attractive. This has especially been the case with sugar-sweetened carbonated beverages. And that has created a battle between the soda tax health advocates and the anti-tax opponents. Now, unfortunately for the anti-tax fanatics, soda taxes, as we know, do work. And as Deb kind of forecast a little bit, hopefully, we may be seeing a global norm cascade around soda taxes on these obesogenic drink products the same way we saw around tobacco. But please, bearing in mind that little picture on the far lower left, even though Canada has a lot of water, but as a Canadian, please do not try to drink Canada dry. And I forgive you for the bad pun, or forgive me for the bad pun. As for trade, a natural experiment that was comparing the just open trade and investment environment in Vietnam with that of the Philippines found that obesogenic soft drinks rose dramatically post-trade treaties in Vietnam, but remained flat in the Philippines. So as battle lines over these healthy and unhealthy foods and concerns over obesity, diabetes, and non-communicable diseases are drawn, the sugar industry is adopting the tobacco industry's playbook in order to counter public health concerns. Buy your own scientists. Question all contrary evidence, sow doubt, blame something else, and create diversions. While actual trade disputes around obesogenic foods have yet to materialize, discussions at the WTO committees on food regulatory practices, notably food labeling, have already spawned a set of industry counter-arguments similar to those used to question tobacco control measures. Not all of the changes in food trade and consumption patterns are a result of trade and investment treaties, but as with tobacco, such treaties can make it harder to regulate for healthier outcomes. This is the well-known case that was already referred to, I think, by Dib in terms of Thailand. It's rather cautionary. So trade treaty threats alone from the U.S. led to the country backing down from its traffic light food labeling system for junk foods to one that was a written message that many in the country would probably not be able to understand. Our own prospective policy analysis of the pre-zombie status TPP also found several potential food and nutrition risks in the additional restrictions it placed on effective food regulatory measures, some of which I referred to earlier. Now, we also found that these TPP measures, and bear in mind that although the TPP is dead, it is resurrecting itself in countless other trade deals that are under negotiation between some of the former TPP countries. So we found that some of these measures to be incoherent with several of the Sustainable Development Goal targets that were related to health and nutrition. And these measures should definitely not be transferred into the new TPP's post-zombie treaty negotiations. A recent quantitative systematic review in the health outcomes of trade and investment treaties that Martin McKee was involved with and will likely discuss shortly similarly found robust and compelling evidence for the impacts of these treaties on unhealthy food beverage consumption, increased cardiovascular disease, and higher BMIs. Now, I don't want to leave you with thinking that our new trade rules make public health regulation for tobacco or food impossible. They do make it more challenging. So thinking about this just in relationship to food, a lot of it depends on how we frame our health policy goals to trade-proof them from potential challenge. A specific instance is how regulations can overcome the necessity test in WTO, and which is found in most regional trade agreements as well. And that's a test that sets several criteria for judging whether a new trade-restricting regulation, even if it's non-discriminating, it treats all products the same way regardless of what country they originate in, whether or not that regulation is really necessary to reach the legitimate public health goal, policy goal. So really what it comes down to is we need to narrow the goals. If you say that it's to increase the healthfulness of the diet and then you have your regulatory measure, what you're going to be challenged by is all other kinds of possible ways, less trade restrictive, to reach that goal. But if you narrow the goal and write it very carefully that that's what you want to accomplish, it becomes almost impossible to challenge that because the only means to do that is the regulation you're putting in place. Now, the bottom line of this is that I believe that we need to continually improve our own trade smarts. And the smarter we become about trade treaties and understanding them, how to use them in terms of drafting public health regulations now in face of present treaties, and more importantly, how to engage more effectively with our trade policy negotiators about future treaties, is probably one of the best ways in which we can try to preserve the policy space for future public health regulation. Thank you.